Aloha everyone, good afternoon. Or as we say it in Ilocano, naimbat mo malang yung aming kaya nakapsat. Alright, thank you for being here today. So I guess I am your host. I did not have a choice but to be here. Otherwise my grades will go down. No, I'm just kidding. So my name is Tristan. I am a major of the Philippine Language and Culture program, concentrating Filipino as well as a biology major. On behalf of the UH Center for Philippine Studies, the Philippine Consulate General in Honolulu, and the Department of Indo-Pacific Languages and Literatures, welcome to our Visiting Professors Lecture Series. So today, we bring you our talk for today, Pepe, Pao, and Pia, a dual perspective on translating Rizal. So you might be wondering who Pepe is. So Pepe is the nickname of the Philippine national hero Jose Rizal. It is a term of endearment or palayaw, usually only used by family and close friends. Pao, of course, is also a palayaw or a nickname for our first distinguished guest who comes to us straight from Marikina, Metro Manila. Known to us from his successful stint with the Center for Philippine Studies and Mamacita Foundation collaboration, Pinoy Food Stories, he will now provide us studies with a series of lectures on translation, food, and popular culture. A graduate of Ateneo de Manila University with a degree in communication arts and master's in basic education, he now teaches Filipino at Ateneo High School. He has given seminars, workshops, and talks nationally and internationally on topics such as media and information literacy, educational design, Philippine literature, and Filipino foodways. He is the editor of Florante at Laura, critical at Interaktibong Edukasyon, and translator of Noli for high school students. A proponent of student empowerment, he seeks to promote critical and student-centered learning inside classrooms. So he has a lot of awards, which include 2000 to 2019 Eagle Fund Award for Excellence in Teaching, Ateneo de Manila High School. 2013 Special Citation for the article Language of the Heart, Crossroads Magazine. 2012 Catholic Mass Media Awards. 2018 Special Citation for Vespers 6 Sadapi Hapon Catholic Mass Media Awards. Here to present Noli Panghayskul, designing Rizal's Novela Tagala for this generation, it's Paolo Paculan, or you can call him Sir Pao. Let us welcome him with a round of applause.
Sound check. Okay. Hello ulit. Okay. Who are here for Ate Pia's class? Ate Precious's class yesterday? Alright, so you know this already. So if it's okay, I'd like to show you how my students and I greet each other. Would that be okay? So I usually just wave energetically. Then I say, Kumusta? Which means,
How are you?
how are you? Yeah, in Filipino. And then they kind of stand up a bit, and then they wave back. And then they say, Sir, not sir, not sir, which is with a Filipino accent, but Sir. Kind of long, okay? Sir. Okay, so let's see if you got that.
Yes.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Kumusta? Some people didn't do it. Okay, let's do it again. And maybe I'll take a video of it so that you'll get a little bit more motivated to do it. And I want to keep this in my memory. Okay, so let's take a selfie, Sam. Okay, so ready? Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Kumusta? Nice. Okay, so yeah, thank you. Thank you for making me feel welcome. So I've been feeling welcome ever since I came here last Sunday. So yeah, and then I'm really glad that there's a lot of you, a lot of people are interested in the topic. And if you're not interested, maybe later you'll be. And thanks for the warm welcome again, and thanks Doc Pia. And let's clap for Doc Pia. Yeah, of course, later we'll thank all our friends. So there's Cez, there's Tristan, Katrin, and China. Yeah. Thank you also to our professors who are here. So I hope you get even a little bit from what I'm going to say. So yeah, so this is the story of how I translated the Noli. It's a very valuable piece of literature for me because it teaches students how to be, for me, change makers. If not for this, I would probably have given up very early on. But I stayed with it for 11 years. And here's how. Well, I started with absolutely no theoretical knowledge of translation. I was doing translation jobs on the side while teaching, but it was more intuitive, probably. But for our purposes, it will be helpful to have one theory, which I will mention later. And it's not a translation theory. In fact, it was made for products and services. So speaking of products and services, I just inserted this in my talk. What do you think I should try while I'm here in Hawaii? So since I got here last Sunday, I tried Loco Moco. Yeah, yeah, and that was so Poke, Malasada. Okay, Island Vintage Coffee. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Island Vintage. Yeah. Kona Coffee.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And Saimin, is that right? Yeah, so I got it. Saimin? Saimin, yeah. And I got it with, I think, roasted chicken. Yeah. So what else should I try?
Spam musubi.
Spam musubi, yeah. I wanted to try that earlier, but I was hurrying back. So,
7-Eleven.
yeah. But it still took me 2 hours to get back though. So, yeah, I keep getting lost and I love it. Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, so where should I take an adventure for the next few days? Spam musubi, what else?
Pickled mango.
Pickled mango?
Yeah.
Alright. Where should I get that?
Kabuko shrimp.
North? Oh,
Yeah, we'll
wow.
do that on Wednesday.
Alright. Thank you, Doc. I'm looking forward to it. What else? Any other suggestions?
Acai bowl. Wait, never mind.
She buys.
Hey guys, alright. Actually, Malasada was one of the suggestions yesterday, and I acted immediately upon it. Yeah, so there. So have you ever thought about why these products are so successful? Yeah, and was the original recipe successful right away? Or did it undergo some tweaking, even with just their family, before they sold it? What makes a good product get to the point that people line up for it every day? So that's precisely what I wanted to do for the Noli. Which brings us to the paradigm I was talking about, which is design thinking. So if you want to take a screenshot of it, it will be useful because it will be the structure of our talk today. So let's get through it. The first stage is, can you read? Thank you. Next one.
Define.
Thank you.
Idea.
Good feeling.
Prototype.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what does this have to do with translation? So I'd like us today to think of translation not just as a work of not just as academic work, not just as a work of art even, but as a product to be used and enjoyed. So you'll see why. For now, let's go to the first stage. The empathize phase for me started one day in 2011. How old were you then, the students here? Were you just haploid cells at that time? What? 8 years old. Okay, so when you were 8 years old, I was in a classroom similar to this. That's not the actual classroom, of course. At the Ateneo de Manila Junior High School. I was subject area coordinator for Filipino then. And a co-teacher who was teaching a second-year class had to go to Spain to chaperone a group of students who were attending the World Youth Day celebration. So I substituted first class for a week. And I enjoyed myself so much. And it just so happened that they were on the last few chapters of the Noli. And we're about to have what we call a long test. Do you have long tests here? Like multiple choice tests, 40, 50 points. Yeah, so we were going to have that. Which they had to study very well for because it was a high stakes test. I can't remember how I came to the conclusion. But that day I found that they couldn't understand the version that they were reading. And they were going to take a long test, and they couldn't understand it. This was a version that I myself had recommended years back. And I myself enjoyed reading. And that my students in the past could read and understand. But then suddenly, this. The book suddenly became inappropriate to its audience. The first solution I thought of was to make an audiobook version of the chapter, for them to at least hear it and maybe understand it more because of the emotion the text would be infused with. But then I thought, hala, we might get into trouble copyright-wise just by reproducing the text in audio format. So I didn't understand how copyright laws at that time, but that was what I thought. So I decided I would try to make my own translation, why, of that chapter at least, just for that long test, for fun. And that's where it started. It was then that I discovered that it was the translator's decision to make a text readable or not. So who are the translators students here? Yeah, so is there a theory that supports that? Okay, anyway. So, yeah, this is the long text. It was then that I discovered that it was the translator's decision to make a text readable or not. Sometimes, even with my meager Spanish skills, at that time, I would find that the original text was simpler to read than the translation we were using. Another discovery was that it was the translator's decision to retain artfulness and nuance, or to give it up in favor of clarity, or to take whole days just struggling with one word or phrase, which is what happened to me eventually. More on that later. In one line of dialogue in the original, where is that? Oh, I think it's this one. The base, I think this one. This one, that one, the repeated verb. Yeah, that's what I noticed. I repeat, in one line of dialogue in the original, I found the word repeated in a way that was beautiful for me. But it was not repeated in the translation we were using. So I repeated the word in my translation. It was in the 6th paragraph of that chapter, and that was about how far I went before realizing that I didn't have the language skills, nor the time to finish it before they took the long test. Then, in parallel, I realized how cruel it was that we were asking students to read a version which they also did not have sufficient language skills to comprehend. I was powerless then to help them. So I think I made them an audio version anyway. I don't remember anymore, or maybe I don't want to incriminate myself. Yes. So this led me to the next stage of the design thinking process, which was to
Define.
Thank you very much. Which for design thinkers means describing your target user and framing the design problem. So I didn't have to think much about a composite user. He was the second-year high school student studying Noli, who was conversationally competent in Filipino, but who would not understand more difficult words. If we were to formally state the design problem, it could be, could we create a version of Noli that is faithful to the original, but also understandable and enjoyable for the students to read? So this is kind of hard. Now we move to ideation. So what product could fill this need? My first idea was just to make it readable, which according to my sources at that time meant, so are there any students of reading here, readability? So at that time it meant focusing on using simpler words and making sentences shorter. So I thought that the fastest way I could do this was to get an open source Tagalog version and just go through it and simplify it and shorten it. So that's exactly what I did. I got the Pascual Poblete version from Gutenberg.org, free to download if you want. which even has a foreword from Neneng Rizal. Okay, so wow, it's that old. It's that old. So certainly it was open source. Right, so then I proceeded to prototype. I remember editing the text in a dark auditorium. This is not the auditorium, that's just the stage. I was surprised that I had this picture. So why did I document what I was doing? Did I know that one day you would be listening to this story? I don't know. So I remember editing the text in a dark auditorium on my small notebook there. I think it was a netbook, while waiting for my panganay, my firstborn daughter's choir, to perform. I was pushing as hard as I could to birth a version that I knew our students needed urgently. Every year, until this was finished, there would be a batch of students subjected to that cruel situation that I saw. Midway, I proudly presented my efforts to the department chair at that time, since he would be the one approving the book for use. And he was kind enough to say, "Ang boring." And really, that was a kindness. If he had said, "That's good," we would have had a substandard version. So after I accepted the truth of those two words, I studied Spanish at the Instituto Cervantes de Manila. I took 5 classes, which is still not enough, while retracing my steps through the book. And these were my classmates who are compañeros until now. I just saw the picture and wanted to put it in. So the idea was to create a faithful, beautiful, non-boring version. Why, thus the next prototype was born. Now, sorry, I was in a sando. Now on my laptop, I had the Spanish text, social, in one window, the Gutenberg English and Filipino versions in another, and my own. This one I pitched to a publisher, and we went as far as conducting focus group discussions to see if the students and teachers would understand the text more. And they did, and were all praises for it. But finishing the draft took longer than expected. But I finished eventually. It was more accurate, but it was long. Which was Rizal's writing style, exactly. And it leaned toward the highfalutin side. Less than the translation we were using, but still on that side of the spectrum. And by the time I finished, I was sure the students were even less attuned to these difficult words than the students in the FGD or in the original classroom. So I made, believe it or not, a third version. Okay, a third full version. This time making the painful decision, yes, painful until now, to abridge the Noli. Parts I had painstakingly translated in which I knew had significance and beauty, the significance and beauty of delete, save us. Okay? All because I looked at the face of my target audience again. I knew he would not have the time to read it all. And I remember myself as a high school student thinking, ang daldal naman ni Rizal.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that mean, ang daldal? He's very talkative, very verbose. But it was his time, right? Because people didn't have Netflix then, right? Or internet games, right? So they read all these books, the long phrases. So Rizal is so long-winded and gives so much unnecessary detail, which I now know was characteristic of the time. So I went through every line again, every phrase, and asked, do we really need this detail? Could we leave it up to their imagination? Is this still relevant? Would this part excite them or bore them? Would the story be just as meaningful and beautiful without this line? And the clincher, if my students' time was as limited as it really is, what details would I want them to focus on? So around this time, I had bought a copy of the Message Bible, which I heard was doing something similar. Who has read this? No? You read even just the foreword. It's a very good piece of translation. Inside it, I read passages that were unrecognizable to me, even though I had been reading, hearing, and even teaching other versions my whole life. Eugene Peterson was an expert in ancient Hebrew and Greek, but his translation, wait, I'm trying to adjust this so that there's no echo, but I think I have to leave it. But his translation was idiomatic, as he calls it, colloquial, even to the point of being idiosyncratic. Because he was a preacher. He's a preacher. So he talked like a preacher, he wrote like a preacher. And I could immediately relate. During a curricular transition period, we were forced to tell our students the story of some parts of the Noli instead of asking them to read it. So I had to do what I hated to do, which was to just retell it. Right? So I became adept at choosing the juicy parts, at injecting those quotable quotes at the right moment. In design thinking speak, the initial testing phase improved my next iteration. The clincher was a meeting in Starbucks in Marikina, where I live, with a former student who at that time was already an admired playwright and director. So after ordering coffee, we exchanged laptops, literally, and I read his script, which eventually won a Palanga Award, probably the most prestigious writing award in the Philippines. So he probably didn't need my help anyway. But I needed his. He said, "Sir, may nagbabasa ba talaga ng footnotes?" Do you understand the phrase? Do people really read footnotes? Why don't we have arrows coming from the difficult words or concepts that lead to marginal notes or drawings? So at that time, he was not thinking of the text anymore. He was talking about the design of the book itself. So because of that, I got Nikki Calma, a close friend who was a terrific artist and also a former co-teacher, and a co-actor in the audiobook chapters I eventually got to record for our students. The goal was to create period-accurate drawings. So yeah, you won't see the period accuracy there so much. But there, scattered throughout the book's pages like they were notes on a travelogue, but which were actually focusing aids. At the same time, the drawings were clarifying things that would take too long for words to explain. Then we thought, what else would they need? How about maps? Okay, this was an actual, the working version of a map. So every time I read something, I moved around the places until eventually, when I was reading, they didn't move anymore. So that means I had a working map of San Diego, which was the setting. So yeah, it became something like this. So I had to look for there, and something like that. And then I had to look for a place on Google Maps that matched this exactly. So I went all around Laguna de Bay, if you know that. So I went all around Laguna de Bay because he said it was in Laguna. And I was doubting, he said it was a fictional place, but I think he pegged his imagination on a real place. And eventually, I found that this place was almost exactly the same. It was the only place where the mountain was close enough to the lake, according to a certain part that he wrote. So, it was Los Baños. Have you been there? Los Baños, Laguna. So I just superimposed the map that I made, and there, for the first time ever, I think, we have a working map of San Diego. So, yeah, so I put this there. And then, yeah, how about more summaries that were exciting to read and not summaries, like they're the most boring things to read. So how about making them more exciting? How about a glossary of cultural terms from the Spanish occupation, even a discussion guide, and of course, voluminous endnotes, in case at least one of them becomes interested enough. And so, the Noli edition Panghayskul was born, after more than a decade of design. So, how did the students take it? What happened in the testing phase? We'll get to that later. So much for the design of the book itself. But now, about the design of the text. By this time, I realized that to make the text exciting, I would have to write as myself. In a way, the translation would have to be a retelling. In the foreword to her excellent English translation of the Noli, Maria Soledad Lacson-Locsin says that she tried to follow the cadence of Rizal's original Spanish. My version would have to be the opposite. It would have to be Rizal speaking through my vocabulary, my timing, my sentence construction, which was tested with the students. Because I already knew how to tell the story. Having been forced by this is an actual slide from that time. Having been forced by circumstances to literally retell it, or rather the gist of it, in the most exciting way I could. This is an actual slide I used back in 2016 during that time I'm referring to. I could already hear the characters speaking. So that was an advantage. And even had to act out some of their lines. But for me, even this retelling is an act of translation. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. So especially since we have some translation students here. This is the second part of my talk, and you're going to have a part in it. Since you are fellow translation geeks, let's go through some exercises together. These are based on problems I myself encountered when making the translation. Are you ready? Yes. I thought you would just be listening today, no? No. Okay, so, alright. The Noli is, first problem. The Noli is written almost exclusively in what language? Espanol. Almost exclusively. Okay, even the title isn't, right? So there are a lot of other parts that are not in Espanol. But there is a phrase that appears 11 times. 11 times, and this is the phrase, en Tagalog, to describe certain lines of dialogue. Why would Rizal specify this? Many translations of the Noli retain this phrase, even though these translations are already in Tagalog or Filipino. How would you, as a translator, solve this problem and still have the effect Rizal wanted to create? That's really a question. It's not rhetorical. So, your job is to translate this. 11 lines have this phrase. What would you do? Anyway, so Sir Siren, you're going to tell us the answer anyway. So no, I want you to think about it. Right. Okay.
When you're translating, don't you have to look at the context, like around what the phrase you're going to
Right.
translate? So like, even though it's the same word throughout everything, it might like have a different meaning within the different contexts, right?
Right. So if you translated this to Tagalog, would you still write in Tagalog for you? Because that's what Rizal wrote. So as a faithful translator, you should do that. But as a designer of a translation for students, could you imagine my high school students, their reaction to, sa Tagalog? Tagalog sila. Aren't they speaking in Tagalog? So why are you telling me they said this in Tagalog? Yeah, so that's the problem. But you're right. You should consider the context. So because it's a different context. So it's not in Spanish. So now it's in the language that is sending. So what do you think? Thank you for injecting that concept.
Well, in that case, it would make sense to remove it since it's not really necessary. Because, like, sure, it would be more faithful to keep it in, but it would also be, like, kind of useless to keep it in because if it's in that language already, you kind of assume that.
Yeah, that might be part of the solution. Yeah, it's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Could you possibly just like put like a little symbol next to it, and then like somewhere on the page, you would put like this symbol means in Tagalog, so that every time you see that symbol, you know what they mean.
Right. So you can replace it with, or you can like footnote it, or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I think part of the answer is lies in understanding why Rizal did it. Why did he have to do it?
Because he had translated the line into Spanish, so he wanted to point out that they were speaking in Tagalog.
Right. Because the other people were speaking in Spanish. Okay. So now, to get the same effect, what do we have to do?
I do the reverse and say everything else is in Spanish.
Everything else is in Spanish, right? So you have to indicate somehow that all the other people were speaking in Spanish. And these 11 lines, these were speaking over in Tagalog. So I think Rizal specified the language people were talking in to denote how language at that time, or maybe until now, is connected to race, status, power, in a word, to a person's character. and all the affordances and hindrances that come with the socio-psychological background denoted by the language they use. Sorry for that. So Rizal wanted the Spanish-speaking audience to hear, or at least imagine hearing, his characters speak in a different language, in Tagalog. Now I have the opposite problem. So even when I was already teaching the Noli, I did not picture Damaso, Salvi, and even the Captain General as Spanish because they were all speaking Tagalog in my head. Right? So that's the problem. As an aside, the same thing happened to me when I first heard Jackie Chan. Who knows Jackie Chan? Oh yeah, okay, so good. So Snake in the Eagle Shadow. Okay, the same thing happened to me when I first heard Jackie Chan speaking English in his own voice. He had an accent which I had never heard the whole time I had been fanboying on his martial arts movies. The voiceover artist's neutral English voice became his voice for me. So that's an aside. So how did I resolve this? I tried to do the two things that you said. So here is Charles Derbyshire's translation, the open source. Can someone read it?
I'll read it.
Yeah, thanks.
All the interest and the greatest animation proceed from a group composed of 2 priests, 2 civilians, and a soldier who are seated around a small table on which are seen bottles of wine and English biscuits.
All right, thank you very much. So now who wants to read the Filipino version?
Tristan.
No, I'm not doing
Tristan.
Don't worry, I'm going to call you later. I want some of them to volunteer. Okay, I think it's time to point to people. Yeah.
Maingay naman ang mga lalaki, lalo na ang isang grupong binubuo nina Padre
Sibila?
Padre Damaso, Teniente Guevara, Senyor Laruja, at isang binatang dilaw ang buhok. Nakapalibot sila sa maliit na mesang may alak at mga biskwit na Ingles. Peninsular na Espanyol silang lahat.
Okay, so can we clap for the two? So what did you notice? What were the differences?
Your translation was more descriptive than the other one.
Right, just more descriptive. This one was just 2 priests, 2 civilians. Yeah, because Rizal likes to let the story slowly unfold, which was very confusing for me, even though I was a teacher already at that time. So I wanted to get it all out there and just put all the names right away. What else? Get that out of the way. The names are the least of our worries. Okay, what else?
Oh, you separate it into like several sentences. It's not just one sentence.
Oh yeah.
So like, even for like the first word, just that's like totally different from what you're saying in the first translation.
Right. So I think I'm taking into account that they're 13, 14 years old, and they have to understand all these things. So if I make them understand all of this in one go, they won't be able to get it. So thank you. I forgot that I did that. I was going to make it into bite-sized chunks to separate it with commas and periods. What else? Yeah.
It's the last line, it's saying like, so
Wait.
isn't that like translating like all of them are Spanish or something?
All of them are Spanish. So the dialogue comes after this. So why do you think I put this phrase, this line in?
So that way, like, you know, when we were talking about how it's like, when they're speaking in Tagalog, speaking in Spanish, it gives them context of who's the other.
Right. So with this phrase, switches your brain to Spanish mode, right? So you suddenly hear them speaking Spanish just because of that phrase. So so now I think I want you to hear how it sounds. The second solution is I inserted Spanish expressions and words that would be recognizable to Filipinos. Maybe because Tagalog already contains versions of these words, or maybe they still hear these expressions around. So here's how it sounds. I hope it works. We'll oh, that's too loud. Let's play it first. Let's move to 4, 3, 2. Alright, it's far enough. Okay.
Darating lang sa bansa ang binatang dilawang buhok. Kausap niya si Padre Damaso.
Hay nako, amigo.
Sabi ng pare,
Kapag nakailang buwan ka na sa bansang ito, makikita mo, ibang-iba rito kaysa Madrid.
Ay, naku,
Pero-
amigo.
Ako, por ejemplo,
Por ejemplo.
23 anyos na akong kumakain ng saging at kanin. Ay, kilala ko ang Indio.
Indio.
20 anyos ako sa San Diego. At ilang buwan pa lang mula nang iwan ko to. 6,000 ang populasyon doon. Pero
Populasyon.
anong kuko alin pa ang pinay kay ano, kung saan masikip ang sapatos ni ano, kung sino ang umano kay ano, kung sino totoong ama ni ano, itanong nyo kay Santiago kung totoo ang sinasabi ko, may hasyenda siya ron.
Pero,
Tapos pag alis ko, halos wala naghatid sa akin. Biruin mo, pagkatapos ng 20 anyos.
sabay inom ng alak, nakasingit tuloy ang kausap. Pero ano pong koneksyon niyan sa monopolyo ng tabako? Tanong ni Dilawang Buhok. Nanlaki ang mata ni Damaso.
Anong koneksyon?
koneksyon.
Hindi mo nakuha? Walang kwenta ang mga reformang ginagawa ng gobyerno.
Okay, so yeah, even you hear it literally, that it sounds different. They speak differently. So I think we got it. We try to get that the Rizal feeling that these people are speaking in different languages. So at least the students are reminded that, oh, they're speaking Spanish, huh? I just have to write it in Filipino so you'll understand. Okay? So, second problem. So those of you who know the Noli know who this is. Doña Victorina. An extension of the previous problem is her. An Indio of pure blood native of the Philippines, but who is a social climber. She hurriedly marries Don Tiburcio de Espadaña, despite the latter having none of a man's desirable qualities, save for being an Espanyol. She wears European clothes and thick makeup, and to complete her being what we call in Filipino as trying hard, Rizal makes her speak in ungrammatical Spanish. Poblete, bless his soul, gives up and just has her speak flawless Tagalog. Other translations show her speaking and writing in ungrammatical Tagalog. But wait, so how would you solve this problem? So she speaks ungrammatical Spanish, which would be comedic. But then the translation is in Filipino. And if you make it ungrammatical Filipino, wait, I thought she was an Indio. So why is she speaking ungrammatical Filipino? So how would you solve this?
Would you just do the same thing you did before, where you add in Spanish phrases that they would be, like, they would know, so that it's like, oh, well, this part is in Spanish because that's why it's broken up, because they're speaking Spanish. But
Right.
we have to translate it to Tagalog so that you can understand it.
Right. So I can just make a note of it. So imagine that this was Spanish, like something like that. Yeah, but the problem with that is we would lose the comedy of it, right? So in the original Spanish, I imagine the people who read it would be laughing. But this time, if you read it in ungrammatical Tagalog, it would just be annoying, maybe. So how would you solve it? Okay, Doc Ian.
I would insert Filipino words into the Spanish because it will show that she would then no longer have the Spanish competency, and then she'll fall back and use Filipino maybe.
Right.
This is my reasoning is the main reason why sometimes, not all the time, people do Taglish or Engalog is because they lack proficiency in both languages.
Right. Okay, so that's a good solution. Actually, the background of my students gave me another solution. What do you think it is? What other language are they proficient in?
English.
Right. So now what would you do? Ma'am.
Combine everything, just
Com-
like the
Combine everything, yeah, yeah. So what would be comedic? What would make them laugh? Okay, so now this is the solution that I thought. Can someone read it? I choose you, Tristan. So wait. This is this was from a letter that she wrote. So this is a letter to her cousin Linares, whom she is pressuring to confront the alferez, the head of the military there, for her. So could someone please read it for me? Preferably with a Filipino accent, okay?
What?
Yeah, you shouldn't sound American in these lines. So with a Filipino accent, okay?
It
So,
might turn out as Ilocano accent.
oh, that's okay. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
I'll try.
Dear cousin.
Dear Kasim.
My dear cousin Sin.
Dear cousin. Okay, dear cousin. Dear Kasim. Okay.
Alright. Dear cousin, inside 3 days, I want to know from you if he killed already the alferez or he killed you. I not want to pass one more day that this animal do not have punishment. If past the time and still challenge him, I go tell to Don Santiago everything. That you never secretary, that you never jokes with Canovas, that you never outgoing with General Don Arsenio Martinez. I tell to Clarita that all of this lying, I not give you more, even 1 cent. But if you go fight, I give you everything. No excuse, no delay please. Your cousin, who love you with heart, Victorina de los Reyes, oh, that's Spanish. Victorina de los Reyes de Espadaña, San Paolo, Monday, 7 p.m.
So now they understand. But because I did this, I had to write a footnote that this is originally in Spanish, right, to explain the whole context. But for them to get the comedy of it, I had to write it this way now. So, So thank you for helping me with that. And now the third problem. In those 11 years I was designing this version, I had a chance to reread Stephen King's memoir on writing. Who have read this? It's amazing. You should read it. Yeah, in it he demonstrates how he writes dialogue, how he listens to his characters speak, and merely writes down what he hears. So he even spells the words differently so that we can hear them too. So I had this problem. It was a chapter entitled Todos los Santos, which happens tomorrow, actually, right? Todos los Santos is? All Souls Day. So, yeah. All Saints Day. Yeah, which happens tomorrow. And the first dialogue was between two grave diggers, digging up bodies to make space for new ones. Alright? It was dirty, disgusting, inhuman work, which could only be done by people who would be used to desecrating those graves. So I could only imagine them with faces crunched up, spitting all the time, and punctuating sentences with curse words. So what would you do in this case? Would you be faithful to what you heard in your mind? So I can't use curse words because they're high school students and their curse words aren't allowed in our school. And even if it was allowed for the students, the gatekeepers wouldn't choose my version because it had curse words. So what would you do in this case? Would you be faithful to what you hear in your mind? Would you erase those words altogether, knowing that the gatekeepers might not get your book? Especially since Rizal himself did not write it this way. You just gave up. That's the easiest option. I couldn't give it up, Mom. I heard, Mama, every time I wrote, they were speaking it. Okay, so what would you do?
Just use punctuation.
Just use punctuation, right? So, yeah, just use ampersands and right. What else? So you can just indicate it, So I think that's the solution. So this is what came up. I wanted to hear it. Let's start at 121. Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Ukay muli. May kasama siyang baguhan, pinagpapawisan, naninigarilyo at dura ng dura. Sabi ng huli, pare, iba na lang kakain natin. Sariwa pa to eh. Nagdurugo pa oh. Tsaka yung buhok.
Ate mo ta. Dati naman, hinupay ko. Wala akong sampuan. Gabi, muulan. Namatay yung ilawan ko. Bumukas yung kabaong. Lumabas ang kalahating katawan. Papo.
Ano kasi ukay? Tanong ng baguhan.
Parang kang Espanyol ah. Yan na yan ang tinanong sa akin ng sundalong Espanyol na pumunta rito. Sabi ko, yun po ang utos ng kura.
Oh, tas anong ginawa mo?
Sakto ka talaga magtanong.
Sabi ng sepulturero.
Sabi ng kura, ilipat ko sa sementeryo ng Inchik. Ang layo pa nun at ang bigat na.
May nabasag akong buhok. Ayoko na. Sabi ng pangalawang lalaki. Sabay alis. Natawa ang sepulturero.
Okay, so how do you think that worked out? Yeah, so that was the reaction of the students too. Yeah, okay, so let's go to the next one. Yeah, I had almost the same problem with Maria Clara's guests at her despedida de soltera, the party announcing her wedding. How would upper class girls speak? So during Rizal's time, it would probably be in impeccable Spanish. But for present day students, I heard them speak like rich college girls. Here is the dialogue. Okay, so now can I ask our teachers to play the two colegialas? Teachers for me who will read the...
Let's go na sis.
Ses and Catherine.
Okay, so Ses and Catherine.
Hindi ba ako na po pangalan ko?
Okay, so thank you for helping me with this. Yeah, so please be the Ses, please be this, and Catherine, you be this.
Saan po sa akin?
Dito. Dito ka Ses, tapos dito ka Catherine, tapos Ses dito ka ulit. So, I'll be the narrator. Kaya kinabukasan ng 8 p.m., hindi ko nilagay, I didn't put alas 8 or ikaw ng gabi, because that would be the shortest way to write it, right? So if you're reading it, this would be the best way. Kaya kinabukasan ng 8 p.m., puno ng tao ang bahay ni Kapitan Tiago. Pero mga Espanyol, Chino at Mestizo lang ang imbitado. Si Maria Clara ang nagpapapasok sa mga dalaga. Sabi ng isa.
So yabang.
So cute actually.
Sagot ng isa pa.
Pero sana he shows someone who has a Matalino face.
Sa ginto, sister, the good girl is making benta herself.
Haging hikam. Okay, so let's clap for it. I don't know if you appreciated that or if you know people who actually speak like that, but I'm sure my students know people who speak like that, might even be their own sisters. So yeah, I just had to do it. Okay, the ultimate test for my translation skills were dialogues between Crisostomo Ibarra and Elias. They were similar in background and maybe even in personality. They both had comfortable childhoods. They were both educated at the Ateneo de Manila. They both had aspirations for the country. They were almost the same age, and maybe even had bodies of the same build. The only difference was, Crisostomo was naive, full of theories he had picked up from his studies in Europe, whose life made a turn for the worse because, While Elias, whose life made a turn for the worse because of his family history, was hardened by deaths in the family, by being considered an outcast, and by living a life under the radar, which made him what we might call an organic philosopher. So how would their words be different from each other? If they were talking, would you recognize who was speaking just by their vocabulary? And as they got closer to each other, would their vocabulary become more similar? So how would you resolve this? Two people who have almost the same background, same age, same gender, just naive and hardened. So how would you do this? How would you resolve it?
I personally feel like at first, like before they got to like actually know each other, they would probably speak down to each other. Because like the one dude like, oh, you're naive, so I don't like you. The other dude like, oh, you're a savage.
Right.
And so, but like as they got to know each other and realize how similar they are, they would probably start to see each other more as equals.
Right. Okay, so thanks. That's exactly what I did. But how would you, on the first conversation, how would you manage that? How would you change the vocabulary for each? Were you raising your hand? No. Maybe you just wanted to subconsciously. Okay, so yeah.
Like how short or how like the length of their talking. So like maybe the more naive one would be talking more, or kind of have like a more positive vocabulary. While the hard one, his phrases are shorter, very curt.
All right. Okay, more earthy. Right. Okay. Thank you. How else would you do it?
It's like the pitch and like the tone of their voice and like how they're projecting the words, like what they're saying.
How they're projecting their words, right? So if you were to speak it out loud, right. So you can manage it that way. What else? What kind of vocabulary would he use? Would it be more educated, right? So educated, naive plus educated equals more conceptual, maybe, no? Maybe up in the air, right? And maybe this educated but also hardened by life, right? Would be a bit more earthy. So here's the audiobook chapter I recorded last year, which I kind of played around with. So try to notice how the language is different or the same. So let's listen to this. This will be a bit longer. So look how I play around with it. Play around with it.
Mahal na tagapakinig, bibig para sa iyo ang isa sa kundi man pinakamahalagang kabanata ng Noli. Bakit ba ang hirap gamutin ang kanser ng bayan? Narito ang bahagi ng sagot. Sarili kong sali ng teksto mula sa mga bersyong Ingles at Espanyol sa pagsisikap na maipaabot sa iyo ang mahiwagang laman ng aklat na ito. Kaya heto ang Noli ni Jose Rizal, Kabanata 61, ang habulan sa lawak.
So this is a conversation this is their last conversation.
Pakinggan, Senyor, ang pinag-iisipan kong plano.
Senyor,
Sabi ni Elias habang patungo silang San Gabriel. Magtago kayo ngayon sa bahay ng kaibigan ko sa Mandaluyong. Dadalhin ko sa inyo lahat ng pera ninyong isinalba ko at ibinaon sa paanan ng balete sa mahiwagang libingan ng inyong lolo. Iwan ninyo ang bansa para pumunta sa iba. Putol ni Ibarra. Para mamuhay ng payapa sa mga nalalabi ninyong araw. May mga kaibigan kayo sa Espanya. Mayaman kayo. Siguradong makukuha ninyo ang pagpapatawad.
he's asking Ibarra to leave the
Sa lahat ng paraan, mas mabuti pa para sa atin ang ibang bayan. Hindi sumagot si Ibarra. Nag-iisip ng tahimik. Noon sila dumating sa Ilog Pasig at sumakay sa Agos ang bangka. Sa Puente de España may nakita silang ng mga bayo. Sumilbato ito, matinis at matagal. Elias, sabi ni Ibarra, kasalanan ng pamilya ko ang kasawian ninyo. Ngunit 2 ulit niyo na akong nililigtas. Utang ko sa inyo hindi lang pasasalamat, kundi na ibalik ang inyong kayamanan. Sinasabi ninyong umalis ako. Pues, Sumama kayo sa akin.
may Spanish.
Mamuhay tayo bilang magkapatid. Dito, kawawa rin kayo. Umiling si Elias at sumagot.
Live with me.
Posible. Totoong hindi ako maaaring magmahal o maging masaya sa aking bansa. Pero maaari akong magdusa at mamatay rito. At para rito. Pwede na.
Okay, so those are the lines. Sorry for those who didn't understand the vocabulary, but yeah. So that's what I try to do. Separate them with their vocabulary. Okay, now for the testing stage, let's go back to this. How did the book fare? When it came out, some teachers feared that the book did not sound like Rizal anymore. So they said, hindi na tunog Rizal. They said. Which I took as constructive criticism, but also with a grain of salt, since I doubt if they ever heard Rizal in the first place. Like my experience with Jackie Chan, all our lives, we probably only heard what Rizal's translators sounded like. And now, this was something new. And this, of course, is true for many parts of the novel. Na hindi tunog Rizal, because, as I said, I retooled it. But last year, a teacher told me about the class he just came from. Incidentally, this is the same teacher I had subbed for 11 years ago. Once again, they lacked the time to have the students read the whole book, and were constrained to tell the class how it ended. So they just told it how it ended. So the teacher had to tell them that Elias died. At that moment, a student stood up and threw his book to the floor. Rock and roll, sabi ko. That's it, that's the goal. And what of my audiobook dreams? Here's a video of my students listening to parts of the book. Coincidentally, it's from the same chapter I first tried to translate 12 years ago, or 11 years ago. It's 2.5 minutes long, so bear with me and try to see what's happening in the class. So don't listen to the audiobook, just see what's happening to them.
Hinabol siya ng pasilyo, natatakot na mawala ang iyong kanyang ina. Sabi ng isang babae sa daan. Saka nang pinalo si pasilyo, pinagmasdan ng babae ang dugo ang mukha. Kumisip na ang isip at nakilala niya kanya na lang. Hindi na nakasinag ka ng batang na imatay. Hanggang pareho na sila, hinabol siya ng pasilyo, natatakot na mawala ang iyong kanyang ina. Ngunit hindi tumisik.
So why were they saying it?
Hindi na nakasinag ka ng batang na imatay.
They said it because they finally realized it.
Hindi ko alam.
But then suddenly, they put it
Pagkalising ba
on.
si Leo? Ito po ay pangalan kanina. Malambing na pangalan. Ngunit hindi tumisik. Tumungo siya sa malapit na batis at sumalog ng tubig gamit ang isang dahon ng saging. Pinilamusan niya ina. Ngunit hindi tumila. Pinakagay niya dibdib. Ngunit marinig niya ito. Pinagkaan ng mga labi. Hindi namin. At agad siyang umiiyak at umuwan.
So now
Pagbangon niya ng dugo, naroon lang sa mga. Ano ba mo?
Sino yan?
Gusto ko siya. Tutulungan ko rin.
So an actor came and they don't know who it is.
Napakalinga ko ngayon. Sagot ng lalaki. Pero magsusugot ko. Makinig ka. Nagustuhan niya ng mahal siguradong bakit na rin ako. Kumuha ng kahoy na bagat. At walang dumating. Makukay ka rito. May makikita kang dito. Marami.
You will see go up.
Sige natin. Pagkakat ka. Makakatay ako. Hindi nakikita ko ang iwan sa aking bayan. At tuwag ninyo hindi mo pinagpagsabi sa ikilis ng gabi. Tumingala siya sa langit. Pinalagdasan. Yumuko at dahan-dahang nahiga sa lupa. Matapos sa 2 oras, naghahanda si Manang Ufa para sa misa. Tumahimik ka Mapunta kasama sa purgatorio. Tingnan natin kung makakalabas ka pa ron. Salbahe.
Okay, so what did you observe? Have you ever seen a literature class like that? Right? No, I've never seen a literature class like that in 25 years. So, I was so happy that that was what was happening, that they were destroyed, you know. The bell rang shortly after that, and a student, that student I pointed out to you, was still hugging a classmate, saying, "Wala na si Elias! Wala na si Elias!" Even the session after, they couldn't accept what had happened. So that's the story of my crazy passion project. An abridged, retold, translated, drawn, designed, recorded version of Noli. And based on how destroyed my students were until a few weeks ago, it turned out quite well, don't you think? These are some things that they said about it. Sobrang nakakalungkot ang aklat na ito. Sobrang saya talagang pagbabasa. So, sobrang lungkot siya, sobrang saya. Isang aklat na parang roller coaster ng emotions. That's exactly what I thought. It was like they were riding a roller coaster, right? When they were listening. So, madali maintindihan, ang aklat na to ay pinakamagandang lubri na nabasa ko. Mas maganda pa to sa mga lagi kong binabasa na manga. Sa tingin ko, kailangan mabasa nito at kailangan ipasa sa mga susunod na henerasyon. Mas sobrang ganda, gusto kong ipamana ito sa aking mga anak. Ang galing ng mga actor sa audiolibro. By the way, that was my brother. The other actor was my brother. Sobrang nakakatulong, nakakatawa, nakakaiyak, napakaganda ng paggawa. Very useful, but I didn't find myself using it. But then he says, idol ko si Selvi. The bad guy. Okay, so, kung ako'y naiinip na agad kong papakinggan ng audiolibro. So if I'm getting bored, I listen to it. Yes! Not boring anymore. Okay, tayo ang susunod na henerasyon na ibinabahagi ni Piloso Potasio. Hindi lahat magtatagumpay. So not everyone or every project will succeed. So that's what I wanted to learn. Na maraming problema sa ating bansa. There will be a lot of problems. Ngunit kaya nating magawa ng mga needs. But we can solve. Merong mga beses na ang aking mga pangarap ay hindi matutupad. There will be times that my dreams will not come true. Kaya dapat hindi ako mawala ng pag-asa. So I must not lose hope. At ituloy lang ito, basta't alam kong mabuti ang kalalabasan. And I just have to go on, knowing that something good will come out. So, I started this project knowing that I had no background in translation field. But I was a practicing translator, and more importantly, a teacher, who every day sought ways of translating the text into the student's language and way of thinking. In the end, it was the design process, which I went through in at least 3 iterations of the book, which was the key. If the book was successful, it would be because we started with empathy, then defined the problem, then ideated for ways, sorry about that, to solve this, then made prototypes, and tested them fearlessly. So after 12 years, the seed has finally borne fruit, and the fruit is ripe for the picking. Yes, translations are works of art and can involve heroic creative effort, but we can also think of them as products with the required user experience design. For audiences such as high school students, they were saying sir, actually. So, for audiences such as high school students, and for works as important as the Noli, siguradong sulit, it will definitely be worth it to test our translations, and to adjust them as needed. So, have you ever thought of translations this way? Leon Maria Guerrero's introduction to his own translation of the Noli mentions the famous saying that every generation needs its own translation of the classics. In a way, he was talking about iterations of the product. And at a time when we teachers feel firsthand that our students' skill level and ways of thinking are changing significantly, in as little as 2 years, we might need more iterations faster than before. After the first 3 iterations that took more than a decade, I'm not sure how quickly I can churn out next versions for the next generations of students. I know that one day even my own hip, enculturated, and contemporary version will sound old and foreign and outdated. And on that day, when that happens, maybe it will be your turn. By the way, just in case you want to hear more of the audiobooks, the first chapters are uploaded on Spotify on the page called PCIJs on the Record, and they will be on Spotify soon, I hope. My brother doesn't want to release them until we finish all, but when will we finish all of it? So it's PCIJs on the Record, the first three are there. And if you're going to teach this or you just want to listen to it, just email me here. And Mahalo, that's my second offspring. Yeah. He's in third year college right now, so he's not that cute anymore. So, yeah, but I still like this picture. So, again, thank you very much. Now, segue.
All right, thank you, Sir Paul, for that very engaging and very interactive talk. I think most of them we can apply in our translation class too. So thank you. So please reserve your questions for Q&A later. We will now call on our next speaker. And so, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and fellow learners, it is my distinct privilege to introduce you our distinguished speaker for today, a truly remarkable individual whose dedication and expertise have left an indelible mark on the fields of literature, culture, and education. Recipient of the prestigious UH Board of Regents Medal for Excellence in Teaching, our speaker, Dr. Arboleda, stands as a shining example of academic excellence. With an impressive academic background that includes a Doctor of Arts degree in Language and Literature, a Master's in Degree in Language and Literature, and a Bachelor of Science in Commerce, all obtained from De La Salle University. Her commitment to scholarship is truly awe-inspiring. Dr. Arboleda's educational journey began at the esteemed St. Scholastica's College, Manila, where she laid the foundations for her future accomplishments. Her teaching portfolio is as diverse as it's impressive, encompassing a wide range of subjects such as translation, theory and practice, Philippine history and culture, Philippine folklore, Rizal's life and writing, and Philippine film, to name just a few. Prior to joining the University of Hawaii, Dr. Arboleda's academic pursuits led her to Osaka University, where she served as a visiting professor, imparting her knowledge of Southeast Asian culture, Philippine literature, language, and history for an impressive 4.5 years. Her teaching experience also includes roles as an assistant professor in Filipino at the University of the Philippines, Baguio, and the University of Philippines in Manila, as well as an instructor at De La Salle University. Her dedication to education even extended to the realm of gender studies at St. Scholastica's College, Manila. Today, Dr. Arboleda's focus extends to producing multimedia instructional materials on Philippine folklore and films, reflecting her dedication to preserving and disseminating the rich cultural heritage of the Philippines. From 2011 to 2021, she served as the coordinator of the Filipino and Philippine Culture Program, and now she proudly holds the position of director of the Center for Philippine Studies, chair of the Department of Indo-Pacific Languages and Literature at the University of Hawaii, and chair of School Pacific and Asian Studies. Please join me in extending a warm and hearty welcome to Dr. Arboleda, a true luminary in the words of academia, culture, and education. We eagerly anticipate the wisdom and insights she will share with us today.
I know, I thought we were going to stay here till 5:30. Sorry, magandang hapon po. Can you hear me? Sorry, nawawala ang... What did we used to do?
Oh, sorry.
We got it. So, thank you. Pasensya na po. Ayaw ko pag-present kasi sobrang ganda ng ink.
Ayun.
Once again, Dr. Pia Ortega.
Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagdalo. Tingnan niyo, okay? Right. Today I'm here to talk about my journey in translation. And Sir Paolo and I didn't talk, but we have common, the themes and the scenes that he has chosen are actually also what I will present. But this time, I'm talking about the film series. So turn on the subtitles, please. I think that inaccurate and ill-timed subtitles are distracting and are a complete turn-off. Subtitles should be sexy, but this process takes time and effort. I will walk you through my process. So why this project? It's because of Twilight. Because my students told me in class one day, "Oh my God, Tita, I read Twilight, all books, one weekend." And I said, "What? All those books, and you can't sit through the Noli." Right? But they say, "I can't read the Noli, I hate the Noli, it's boring." You know, one whole semester and they still haven't read the whole book. And then what do we talk about in Rizal class? Okay. So I found, my project, I began the project in 2010, I completed it in 2012. I was under time pressure, not 11 years. I revised it in 2013. There were 13 episodes, 5,135 lines, and we needed 4 terabytes of computer data and 0 funding. But I had a secret weapon who was one student assistant, Modesto Bala, and he is now PhD, doctor in pharmacy. Okay. So he did all of the initial subscription of the tests, single-handed. So my target audience, Filipino heritage learners, and non-Filipino speakers. My aim was to rescue Eddie Romero's masterpiece from oblivion because it was sitting in the library, VHS copies, nobody could use it, it was going moldy because it had no subtitles. Okay? So I wanted it to be accessible to a new generation of viewers, and I wanted to faithfully communicate the message of the film so that it produces the same understanding, okay, for non-Filipino viewers as they would for native speakers. We no longer use that. It's speakers with advanced proficiency in Filipino. So my theory, sorry, I'm a nerd and I need to do theory and I teach theory and this is coming out of my students' ears, it's always NIDA. And I said, but I told them, come to my translation class and you will put an end to all debate. Because, why is it translated this way? Because NIDA said. So now you have ammunition, right? And you would never ever lose an argument. Because you can't say, it just feels wrong. Parang mali, you know. You need the theory. So I wanted to, translation consists in producing in the receptor language the closest natural equivalent. Okay? First, in terms of meaning, and then secondly, in style. That's easier said than done. But NIDA isn't enough because we were translating something that was not contemporary. We needed to apply meaning-based translation. So Mildred Larson from this book says a good translator must consider the communication situation, okay, what is happening in the conversation. So you needed historical setting, okay, this is an old, really, really old text. The cultural setting, the intent of the author. Of course, Rizal's dead, you can't ask him what he intended. You can only try to guess what he wanted to say. There are different kinds of meaning contained in the explicit, okay, and then the implicit. So the connotations, the nuance, as Sir Paolo was talking about. Then there's the situational meaning. So what the same word used differently will mean something else. So for example, the word maganda ka, okay? Ang ganda mo means you are so beautiful. But if I say this, ang ganda mo talaga. Okay? That means it kind of medyo patay, right? Then catfight. Okay. Then, Mildred Larson further states, one must try to translate idiomatically, okay? Not literally, so that it would not sound like a translation. So it's like poetry. Poetry must be read, and that's why it works. The audio libro works because words on the page need to be heard. Okay? So if it doesn't sound correct, it will not be sexy. So it shall sound natural in the target language, but we should not overextend ourselves. Ginanahan, sobrang layo na, malayong sayo. Okay. So, here are my challenges. Okay. Sir Pao points out the challenge was Rizal himself because in the original, that whole thing is one sentence. Thank God I'm not translating from Spanish. That's a one whole sentence. Okay, so Rizal is very mayabang, you know. He wants to show people he knows many, many things. Okay, so the adaptation by Eddie Romero was translated into Filipino by Jose Arago, Nicanor Tiongson, who used to be the president of the Cultural Center of the Philippines, and Rolando Tino, who is the director. But so they tried to remain faithful to the novel. So what happens in the series? Lengthy dialogue, okay? Quotes in Spanish and Latin. What do I know about Latin? Or Spanish for that matter, you know. And then there's a lot of philosophical concepts. Because Rizal wants to show, oh, I read about, I know of I know of all the Greek authors, and I know hieroglyphics, and I know all these, you know, profound concepts. He wants to show that he's really, really smart as a writer. Okay? But also, Rizal knows how to adjust according to who is speaking in the text. Okay, here are my sources. So can you imagine, I finished my subtitles 2012. The first translation by Derbyshire into English was done in 1912. So a century later, I was working on the subtitles for this. If I were to recommend a translation to my students, I will not choose that one. And you will know why later. But it's a good resource. Then there's the Filipino version by Virgilio Almario. I actually looked at almost all translations that are available. This is my favorite and the one that we used in class by Soledad Lacson Gapsin. Okay, so here's a sample. I'm going to show clips from the movie, and I tried to, because you are my audience, and I can't actually sit through more than a minute of video, so I'm trying to do that here. If it's a little long, please bear with me. So here's a sample of the Spanish text in the series. This is Padre Damaso.
En el nombre del Padre, del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo. Amén. Spiritum tuum dedisti, qui doceret Deus, et mana tuum prohibuisti ab ore eorum, et aquam dedisti eis insipid. Palabras del Señor por boca de Esdras, libro 2, capítulo 9, verso 20.
That's all the one that we have during the sermon.
Esplendoroso y relumbrante es el altar. Ancha es la puerta mayor. El aire es el vehículo de la santa palabra divina que brotará de mi boca. Akala nyo ba na ang pag-aari ng konting lupa at ang pamustura ay sapat na para umangat kayo sa karaniwang Indio? Ang kakapal ng inyong mga mukha. Walang pinag-iba ang mayamang Indio sa mukhang Indio. Lahat sila ay puros Indio. Umangat lang ng konti, umangat lamang ng bahagya sa mga tsongos.
So I didn't translate that. I took that word for word from Soledad Lacson Gapsin's Noli because I wanted to make sure that the Spanish was reflected correctly. And I indicate that at the end of at the credits for each of the episodes. So the Spanish text was by Jose Rizal. The music was by Ryan Cayabyab, who is a contemporary composer, and the background and the accompaniment was done by the Philippine Philharmonic Orchestra. The English translation is from Soledad Lacson Gapsin. And the only decision I made there was to choose the version to use for the subtitles, because Derbyshire has a version. So this was the original in Spanish, this was Derbyshire's version. Okay? Sweet is dead for one's native land, where all is dear, the sunbeams bless. There's no word bless in the original. Dead is the breeze that sweeps the land, without a mother, home, or love's caress. There is no caress in the original text. But the intent of Derbyshire was to make it rhyme, which was actually a bit strange because the original didn't even rhyme. So what I did was to look for the most accurate version, and this was what I found. So it's almost a mirror image and matapat, or a true translation, or faithful translation. So sweet is the death for one's own land, la propria patria, where all is loved under the sun, el sol, death is the breeze, la brisa, for him who has not. So it's un patria, a country, una madre, a mother, and un amor, a love. So for that part, my job was already done for me. But of course, I needed to know where to find this version. Okay. So sometimes it's done for you, but for the rest of the text, some heavy lifting had to be done. Okay. So here, the target audience were students who have not read the novel. So there is a false presumption from the writers that the audience read the novel. Okay? But here I'm using it for students who may not have read, didn't go to high school, didn't know about the Noli. So here's a problematic scene. So this was the meeting of Maria Clara and Ibarra. They hadn't seen each other for like almost a decade, and this is the first time they're seeing each other. And there's a reference to a letter.
Gusto kong Susan. Meron akong nalalagay.
Sinabi ng aking ama, ako'y dapat lumayo. Isang pinatahandaan niya. At kung ikaw ay bumuntod na lamang sa akin, hindi mo matutuklasan ang iyong sarili. Tinanay niya ang aking luna. At kakahihiyan magtatag ko ang aking pagmamahal sa iyo. Na hindi ko maubos isipin na mapahiwalay sa iyo. May bagay na katangi-tangi ang tingin. Subalit paano mo magsisimula kung hindi ka karapatan? Ano ang dapat kong gawin? Tanong ko sa kanya. Upang maging karapat-dapat. At ang tugon niya ay, kasalalay hindi sa iyo gagawin, kundi sa pagiging makatao mo. Gusto mo bang makita?
So, if you didn't understand what was going on, who do you think was speaking when she started to say, my father said?
I thought it was like the letter that he left for her, so she was speaking from his words that he wrote for her.
Okay, so that's clear to you, right? Okay, if I didn't specify that, you would think she was talking. Maria Clara was saying, my father told me, blah, blah, blah. Because this was how the dialogue went. Okay? Tungkol sa kamusmusan, meron pa bang nalalabi? Then, there was no transition, and then she just started to talk. Okay? So, what that scene was showing was that she memorized all the lines. Okay? So, she didn't have to open the letter. She can tell you what was in that letter, because she read it so many, many times during the years that they were apart. So, there was no transition, so the speaker was vague. So, isang binata ka na, at kung ikaw ay bubuntot na lamang sa akin, hindi mo matutuklasan ang iyong sarili. Like, where did that come from? Okay, that's a very confusing line. So, when he asks our childhood, do we really have any left? We had to insert, you wrote me once. So that wasn't in the dialogue, which means these were Ibarra's words in the letter, not Maria Clara. Because she wasn't even holding the letter. How would you know that that was where it was from? You would know if you read the text, but not everybody has read the text. So then, you wrote me once, my father told me I should leave. Okay? So this was what happened. He had to go and study. and to leave behind his childhood friend and sweetheart. Okay? You're a young man now, he said, so that's the father. And if you remain in my shadow, you won't find yourself. Okay? And then, at the end, she says, gusto mo bang makita? Would you like to see? See what? Right? So, we don't know what was going on in that dialogue. So, I had to say, would you like to read the letter you left me? And then she brings it out. Okay. So, this is a decision that we needed to make because I knew the people who were going to view this had no idea what was going on in that text. Okay? This is an important scene in the novel because Maria Clara was such a brat, like, oh my God, maybe you forgot me, there were so many women, like, like Colegiala, maybe being jealous, and oh, you forgot me, and there were many women, and blah, 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 and then very smoothly he says, Mari ba kitang malimot? How could I forget you? When I see the flowers, I see your face, blah, blah, blah. And then she was so big and happy. Was that my mother? Okay. Then here, looking at Mildred Larson. So we needed the cultural context. So this was a scene in which they were interrogating people who were caught because they were suspected revolutionaries. And they had to, this is the...
Arsilo Alasigan. Sino ba yung pinakausap mo? Maupo ka!
So very short scene. Right? So it says, mamupo ka. Okay? The root word is po. Like, salamat, salamat po makes it polite. Right? So the translation could have been, the literal translation is say po. But like, what does that mean? Okay? If you don't even know what po means. So our translation is show respect. Okay? So it's communicative in that sense. Because unlike book, we can't always have the footnote attached to the video. Another short clip.
Magsalita ka! Magsalita ka! Magsalita ka! Magsalita ka! Magsalita ka! Pangit mong babae ka!
Sila naman ang tulakan niya!
Ang pangit mong babae ka. So the literal is you are ugly, it's too mild. So like you are hideous. And then you look hideous, right? And then bulag lamang ang magnanais na sumitin sa'yo. Only the blind will desire to sleep with you. But this is, and then, hugutin ang dila ng anak bulating yan. So anak bulati is literally, so pull out his tongue. Okay. But anak bulati is son of a worm, right? And so like, what does that mean? So we had to invent a word. Pull out that worm spawn's tongue. Okay, it's a bit wordy, but at least it sounds a bit insulting. And then people ask me, but there's no such word. You had to invent it. Of course you invent it. Of course you have to invent words. All words were invented at the beginning, right? And so these were some of the things that I had to do so that I could make sense of the text. And then this phrase, salamat senyora at ipinaghiganti ninyo ako. Ipinaghiganti means to be avenged. Okay? But that's not what it means. Thank you, Senora, and you avenged me. So this was inaccurate. It's the wrong tone. Okay? Because what he actually meant is because he hates the altaress. So she is his punishment. Okay? Because you're his wife. I don't even need to inflict any punishment for him. You are the punishment. Okay? So thank you, Senora, for you are my vengeance upon your husband. Because it's a sarcastic tone. And it makes sense because like look at what they do on a daily basis. It's them fighting almost every day. Right? Then here, there are a lot of silences and gaps. Because it's a film, you would think, oh, it's okay, maybe because there's visual stimulus that they'll get it. But there are many things that aren't actually said or mean something else if you translate them literally. For example, this scene.
Ano talaga yung pinagkakasayahan? Wala. Naalala ko lang ang mga panlilinan ng mga binata ng kapanahonan natin para tayo makapag-isa. Wala akong alam sa pinagsasabi mo. Kahit pinsan, hindi pa ako napag-isa ng kasama lalaki. Maliban na sa pag-isa lang. Ika, pag hindi ka tumigil yan, kakabagal ka. Ano nangyayari sa'yo? Kakabagal? Saan ka nakapunta sa kumpisala? Kasi sa isip meron ka.
So do you get why it's funny? Why is it, what are they laughing about? Why was it funny? It's about the confessional. What happens in the confessional box, sa kumpisalan? You get it, no? What happens? Here, let's break it down. Ano ba ang pinagkakasiyahan mo? What's so funny? You know, what amuses you? Okay? So I remember the tricks of the boys because remember this is the time when if you see their ankle, you have to marry them. And so Padre Salvi was so titillated when some women were crossing the river and he could see the ankles and he was hiding like a really mean stalker behind the bushes. Because at that time, even something as one's ankle is considered erotic because they were all covered up. Okay? I don't know what you're talking about. I've never been with any man. Okay, this is the aunt who was always Maria Clara's chaperone. Okay? I've never been alone except when I go to confession. Okay? And then she starts laughing. Right? Because it's actually more dangerous to go to confession than to play around with the young men of your age. Okay? And then, so kakabagan means stomach gas. Okay? So if you don't stop that, you will get stomach gas. Okay? Doesn't make sense. So if you don't stop that, stop laughing, your stomach will bloat. Okay? Ano pang nangyayari sa'yo? Okay? Kakabagan ka, kakapunta sa kumpisalan. Okay? Your stomach will bloat from visits to the confessional because at that time, the priests were sometimes harassing, maybe sometimes it's consensual, but I doubt it. And therefore, you're actually more endangered. So the risk of being pregnant is more real if you go to confession than if you just played or talked to somebody during a picnic with everybody else watching. So humor and situations, humor, these are the most difficult I found that these were the most difficult to translate. Yeah. And then, anong klaseng pag-iisip meron ka, which is literally, what kind of thinking do you have? Right? But then it's like, what a dirty mind. Okay, because like, she was the only one who would think about these things. Okay? But between the two of them, you'd rather be the other person who's aware of what's happening in the confessional rather than be naive. Okay? And of course, spoiler alert, Maria Clara's father is a priest. Okay? Sorry, have you not read it? Okay, never mind. Okay, and following the lecture of Dr. Michael Coroza, I wanted to show you the scene of Elias dying. Okay, this was, and he was last time talking about the theme of Madaling Araw, like the dawn, the coming of the dawn. Okay, so this was the scene. So okay, Elias will die, and this is the scene. So a little different. The rendition from the movie is different from the original text.
Natatapos ang tungkol. Napapalat pa rin sa tinig. Nawa'y tulungan ng Diyos ang makakakita sa liwanag ng pagbubuan ni Wayway. Sana'y pinatay nila ang mga nanunong sa gabi. At loobin nilang huwag mabalik kailanman ang kainulang kinalagmukan namin.
So the translation, Virgilio and Mario's translation of the original text from Rizal, mamamatay akong hindi nakitang sumilay ang bukang liwayway sa aking bayan. Kayong nakakakita, salubungin siya. Huwag ninyong limutin ang mga nabuwal sa dilim ng gabi. I die without seeing the dawn break on my country. You who are about to see it, greet her. Do not forget those who have fallen during the night. So the Madaling Araw, waiting for the dawn, the hope of the people, freedom, that became a theme in many of our literary work. So here are my final thoughts. So remember that scene, Elias and Ibarra were always talking on the river, there's a moon, you know, what will happen to our people, when will there be peace, etc. Okay. It's very important that the text and all the scenes and the nuances of all the dialogue, not just this one, be communicated faithfully for the subtitles. Okay. So Edgar Carrot says, translators are like ninjas. If you notice them, they are no good. I am a translator because I want to perfect the power of invisibility. It is a solitary exercise meant for people who are a bit insane. So just me and Sir Pao, and people who have no social life. Can't even find the time to go to the gym, exercise. But if you do it well, okay, if you do it well, sometimes we create a positive impact. This series is now being used in all classes of Rizal, and sometimes if you need film clip from the novel, at least the subtitles are now available. This project was that 2012, I was up for tenure, and then they said, your subtitles will not give you tenure. Nobody cares about subtitling. Who cares about this text? And then when the pandemic hit, everybody needed digital materials and everything. And so I felt a little bit vindicated because there is a need, because we are talking about access. The other issue, particular scene, reminds us that Filipinos have always argued whether Rizal is a reformist or a revolutionary. I think that that should be the least of our worries. The way we view the world will always color the way we read a text. Meaning, if you're a revolutionary, you will think it's revolutionary. If you're a reformist, you will say that the Rizal is a reformist. Even the Bible has been used as a means to oppress and repress people. A person who has the revolution in their heart will always find the subversion in all things. Rizal's ideas remain revolutionary and relevant to this day. In fact, if Doctor Who will let's Rizal time travel, okay? And if Rizal sees our current circumstances, I think he will be sorely disappointed and furious about the way we have conducted ourselves. We have not learned our lesson because we have not heeded his advice. It is for us to know that we need to fight for freedom and peace based on justice. We must envision a better world. I will leave you with the words of my mentor, national artist Cirilo F. Bautista, from his book, Sunlight on Broken Stones. He imagined that when Rizal was executed in Bagong Bayan, he imagined that maybe the thing that he wrote, Mi Ultimo Adios, my last farewell, they say that he wrote that the night before he died. But Cirilo Bautista, being an imaginative writer, and he's a member of the Knights of Rizal, every December 30th, he will walk from the prison cell of Rizal, walk down the steps to Bagong Bayan to commemorate his death. He imagined that what if that wasn't the last thing he wrote? What if when he died, a person of the same size and build of Rizal came and took his shoes and wore them and finds in there a new text, something that he would leave the people. And so this was he said. So one of us wore them, shoes, who had the same build as the doctor, that's Rizal, okay? Though he suffered a bit from the leather, not used to being shod. We read in the papers unfolded in camp about resurrection, history turning brown under the white sun, about rapacity's sort, agitation of culture, politics as perturbations of love, and other things that we imagined him to say to us, though they were not said, not there in the paper, but in between spaces and syllables. On with the revolution. That was what Cirilo Bautista imagined he would say on his last days. So that clogged the highway with people power to destroy a tyranny with songs and prayers that cures us, assures us, tells us where to go and how to be wise, that fills our days with sunrise, sunrise, sunrise. Viva la revolución! Okay. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas!